Hi, welcome to this open classroom with Noura Masry, who has joined us from close by LAU online to meet with students in this Media and Palestine course. Students who have gathered in the seminar room at LAU to speak with you and discuss your research article, but students who are also gathered online to join us in virtual exchange from the online free open course called Media and Palestine as well. And so we thank you very much for taking your time to present your research to us. This is going to be the first time that students in the Media and Palestine class get to see research that uses both qualitative and quantitative methods. And so students later this semester and as well as on the online course will have a chance to analyze anti-Palestinian media bias. And specifically in this course, students will be asked to conduct a qualitative and a quantitative analysis of media content. And so your presentation today is a chance to introduce them to qualitative and quantitative analysis, analyzing and investigating media representations that reproduce anti-Palestinian media bias. I want to acknowledge that Noura Al-Misri is a alumni from LAU. You see the great places being an alumni from LAU take you. She graduated with a master's degree in interdisciplinary gender studies in the spring of 2024, which means she conducted research during a time of genocide. It is not easy to do anything but want to act during times of genocide to stop the atrocities that are all around us. But at the same time, scholarship research is a form of action. It is a form of resistance. And so I want to acknowledge the great and important work that Noura did documenting these narratives in the media to help us understand, all of us understand, what the media is projecting to us, but also how the media is actively complicit in genocide. And she was able to document that in her research. And so I'm very happy to welcome her to this open classroom. And Noura, I'll pass the microphone to you so that you can start your presentation. And then the students today, they've prepared questions that they will discuss with you after the presentation. And I've already promised them that you have prepared news headlines that you want them to analyze. So we're very much looking forward to this open classroom.
Okay. So, hello everyone. First, I'm Noura. Just to give you an idea what I will be doing today. So first of all, I will be presenting a quantitative paper that was recently published in Communication Culture and the Critique. And then I will be presenting a qualitative paper that I am we're working on. So I will start with the quantitative one. The quantitative one is titled "The Gender Hierarchies in Reporting Genocide: An Analysis of the Dehumanization of Palestinian Men in Western Media." And so a bit of overview about what this paper is. So basically, this study focuses on two Western media outlets, CNN and the BBC, and it looks on how these media outlets covered Palestinian men during the ongoing Israeli war on the Gaza Strip. So it does so by focusing on the language that was used by both these media outlets, but also on highlighting the emissions that were reflected in the language. So it answers the following question: how did mainstream Western media? Yes.
Just a quick question, quick point. Can you put your slides in full view, slideshow view, if possible?
I think they are. Just let me try again. Do they look in full slideshow view or no?
No, I have it still with the side part, but it's okay if that's how it is. It's fine. Okay.
I will try just one more time. Just let me see if it will work. Did it work or still no?
No, it's fine. You can also try under view or slideshow at the top.
Yes.
You see the option.
Yes. Okay. Now, did it work?
No. No.
That's
it's
weird.
fine. Let's go.
Okay.
Let's go with it like it is. Okay.
Okay. So for the research question, it is how did mainstream Western media coverage of the war between October 7 and December 31st, 2023 contribute to the dehumanization of Palestinian men and boys? And now a bit of the theoretical framework that was used. Basically, we used decolonial studies, and we focused on dehumanization in decolonial studies. So dehumanization is an integral part to colonization, because when you need to justify the violent treatment of the other, you can compare it to a subhuman creature or to an animal and so on in order to justify this treatment. And during the ongoing Israeli war on the Gaza Strip, Western media did dehumanize Palestinians in a number of ways. So first, by dehistoricizing and decontextualizing the events, which means that mainstream Western media did not mention the historical context of the colonization of Palestine, and it also did not mention anything about the Nakba. There is an ongoing Nakba denial. Second, by obscuring the Palestinian lived experience. So we don't know what Palestinians are living during the ongoing war on Gaza, because mainstream Western media does not give them a space in order for them to tell us what they're living. And then by omitting the Palestinian narrative, so whenever an event happens or something happens, mainstream Western media does adopt Israeli talking points, but they do not adopt Palestinian talking points. And by circulating false narratives that vilify Palestinians and their resistance. And we saw that at the beginning of the events of October 7th, where mainstream Western media circulated stuff about Hamas beheading babies or Hamas raping women and so on. And fifth, by adopting emotive language only to humanize Israelis, but not Palestinians. So emotive language is rarely used to describe Palestinians in any way. So the methodology that we followed was a web scraping technique. So the web scraping targeted two websites, the BBC News websites and the CNN International website. And I will quickly explain how that was done. First, we used Python to develop the codes. On the BBC website, there is an Israel section. So the code targeted the Israel section and articles that were tagged under Middle East in the Israel section. But all the articles had to be published between October 7 and December 31st. And then when it accesses an article, it goes down to the end of it, and there's additional subtags like these, which shows these subtags: Israel, Gaza, War, Gaza, Palestine, Palestinian territory, and Hamas. And so if these are present, the code just extract the article. For the CNN,
Noura, we're not seeing whatever you're pointing us to.
Okay.
So you're saying the methodology now, and you're pointing to the tags and so on. We're not
Yes.
seeing that. We're seeing research questions.
Oh, you're still in research question.
Yeah.
Okay. I will try to stop sharing my screen and then share my screen again.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe it's frozen in
Yeah.
StreamYard or something.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see now or no?
Yeah, just a second. So it's on research questions. Are you able to change it?
No, I'm now in theoretical framework.
Okay, I have the slide on my side, so I'm just going to try sharing from my side. So go ahead and stop sharing.
Okay.
This is what we call in live broadcasting rewind. We're going to rewind a little bit and go back to your methodology and pretend like nothing ever happened, okay? So let me see if I can present this. It's processing. Okay, that one is still processing. I'm going to try to share my window instead. So I'll start you back at the methodology, okay? And just tell me when you want to change the slides.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. Okay, slide 1, 2. Here we go. Okay.
Okay. So I will repeat. Okay. So I will repeat the methodology now. But can you hear me?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So for the methodology, we adopted a web scraping technique. So we targeted two websites, BBC News and CNN International. Please, next slide. Okay, so we used Python to build a code, and for the BBC website, we have an Israel section. The code accessed Israel section, and then we have articles tagged under some tags. We chose the Middle East tag, so the code then accessed the Middle East tag, and the article had to be published between October 7 and December 31st. Please, next slide. Okay, so at the end of each article, there's additional subtags, like you see here. We chose these subtags: Israel, Gaza war, Gaza, Palestine, Palestinian territory, and Hamas. And so when these subtags are present, the code just extracted the article and put it in a notepad. Please, next slide. So for the CNN website, it was a bit different because there wasn't a section. So what we did, we went to Google and we typed, for example, November 29, 2023, Israel-Hamas war. And this is a link that takes you to a page where all the snippets of article that were uploaded in November 29 are present. And so we did it manually, Control A, then Control C, and then Control V. And then we cleaned the data manually. Please, next slide. So after copying everything, we built another code for the chosen keywords, and the code for the chosen keywords were run through the notepad. Please, next slide. Okay, so here we have the results of the analysis. First of all, for the BBC website, we see that at the start of the events, there were around 9 articles published by day. At the start of the events, Israelis were also getting attacked. So there's a lot of articles getting published about that. But then we see that whenever Gaza was getting bombed, the number of articles that was being published by day really dropped and kept dropping until it reached the 0 articles that fit the criteria that we followed on December 30 and 31. Please, next slide. As for the words, the keywords that was mostly used by BBC, we have Israel, we then have Hamas, and we have hostages. And now we compare hostages and prisoners, which is used to mainly describe Palestinians. We see the difference. And then we have a consistent Nakba denial, where Nakba is only used 10 times. And when we look at men and boys and women and children, we have only 2 times men and boys, but we have around 100 times women and children and women. And then we see that terrorists is used more than militants. Please, next slide. Even though the BBC uploaded an article explaining that they don't use terrorists, they do use militants. So when we see that terrorists is used more, it means that the BBC is mainly adopting Israeli talking points. Please, next slide. As for, we then chose certain keywords to check their variations over time. So first we have the word hostage, which is dark blue. We see that this keyword is present throughout the 3 months. Same thing will go to the word, to the keyword Hamas, and then which is in red, and then we have terrorists in purple too. Please, Can they check the next slide to see that it's consistently published? Yes. So it's consistently used throughout the whole month, even in December. But then we look at keywords such as prisoners, and these keywords are not consistently used. For example, prisoners is used here, which is in green. And this is the prisoner hostage exchange deal. And then we have the keyword raped. It's not used, for example, here in November is 0, but then in December, please next slide, we see that the keyword raped is used here. It's the light blue. This is the keyword raped. Okay, so please next slide. As for CNN, we see a similar pattern where at the onset of the events, there were many articles being published per day, and then the number of articles published per day dropped down drastically when Gaza was being obliterated. Please, next slide. Also, we have similar patterns where Israel is mostly used, then Gaza, then Hamas, and then hostages compared to prisoners. Hostages 7,000 times, prisoners 700 times. And then we also have Nakba denial, where Nakba is only used 14 times. Refugees is rarely used compared to the other keywords. And then we also look at terrorists and militants, and terrorist is used 1,000 times, which is relatively high compared to the other keywords. And we have men and boys rarely used, it's only 5 times, while women and children is used around the 300 times. Please, next slide. Same thing we see here that Hamas is consistently used throughout the month, which is in red, and then the dark blue for hostages. It's used throughout the month. We have terrorists also used, not as much as these two, but it's also used throughout the 3 months. But then we look at prisoners, it's rarely used too in the green one. And then rape is also rarely used. Please, can we move to the next slide? Okay, same thing here, but here we have the prisoners hostage exchange deal, and here prisoners is used. Next slide, please. And then here we have the word raped used here in December, at the start of December. We can see the variations here. Please, next slide. So when we look at these results, we can draw some conclusions. First of all, we can see that the word men and boys is rarely used, but the other keywords such as terrorists and sometimes Hamas are used consistently throughout the 3 months. So then we can conclude that the Palestinian men and boys, their suffering is really marginalized, and their death is really marginalized. And at the same time, these men and boys are lumped together under one banner, which is the banner of terrorists. It's not like they can be just men and boys or normally human beings. No, they are described as terrorists. And then when we look at when the word raped was evoked, we see that it was evoked in December. So we can conclude that when Israel's image was being tarnished because Israel was committing more war crimes, when mainstream Western media evoked the Orientalist framing of the Palestinian man or the Arab man in general as a violent and hypersexual terrorist in order to legitimize Israel's bombing of the Gaza Strip and legitimize the ongoing genocide. Please, next slide. So as a conclusion, we can conclude that the association of terms such as terrorists with the word with man, and there is a disproportionate focus on women and casualties, not just casualties, but also lived experiences among women and children. And these do reproduce the gender hierarchies in reporting genocide. So even the reporting of this genocide is gendered. And we can also say that the coverage do frame Palestinian men as violent aggressors, while at the same time not mentioning them will point us that Palestinian men's and the atrocity that were committed against them were really getting neglected, even though they were suffering a lot under the occupation and from the bombing and so on. Please, next slide. Okay, so now we explained the quantitative part, which is a paper in itself, and now we will delve a bit in the qualitative analysis. So this qualitative analysis is, we're still working on it, that's first. And second, it's a comparative analysis. So the title is A Qualitative Analysis of 3 English Media Outlets' Coverage of Palestinian Men and Boys During the Ongoing Israeli War on the Gaza Strip. Please, next slide. So why is this research important? We do realize now that Palestinian men and boys are being dehumanized in mainstream Western media, but we do not have a comparative research to examine how the coverage might differ in other media outlets that maybe can be considered fair, such as Al Jazeera English. So in this study, we compare 3 media outlets, the BBC, CNN, and Al Jazeera English. Especially building on the previous paper that Palestinian men and boys are really dehumanized. Please, next slide. Okay, so for the theoretical framework, we again goes back to dehumanization as being an integral part of colonization and integral to maintain the state of Israel as it is now. And then we see that in an anti-Palestinian media bias, language and its use and misuse was essential in maintaining this bias. But also we have like visuals. Visuals are also essential in maintaining the anti-Palestinian media bias. And we know that also relating it to the previous paper, that media is using dehumanization as a tool to manufacture the consent in order for Israel to carry on with its genocidal tendencies inside the Gaza Strip. Please, next slide. So for the methodology for this study, we used a qualitative codebook. So the qualitative codebook contains the stuff like what is the title of this article, when it was published, who are the main characters that are present in the article, how are they described, these characters, and what words are associated with the characters, are they described as violent or not, is there any words that refer to this language, Orientalist language or Orientalist tropes. We also examined the pictures and videos that were present in the articles, as well as the captions of the pictures and videos. Now, to source for the articles, we did not choose to adopt an anti-Palestinian media bias framework. Rather, we did a grounded approach. So basically, we search for certain events, but we also had several criteria in order for the event to fit. So first, the event had to be published between October 7, 2023 and October 2024. The event had to contain images and videos, but also it had to contain relevant text, so not just the snippets of text, to allow us textual analysis. And the event had to have happened inside the Gaza Strip and not outside the Gaza Strip. Please, next slide. Okay, so for the findings, I will be presenting the findings of 2 news events first. And the first one that I chose is the killing of Professor Rifat Al-Arir by an Israeli airstrike. So first thing we're going to do is reflect on the headlines of BBC and CNN. First thing, the headline of BBC says, Rifat Al-Arir, Palestinians mourn writer killed in airstrike. And then CNN, prominent Gaza professor and writer killed in airstrike weeks after telling CNN he and his family had nowhere to go. So the first thing we notice is that we don't know who did the airstrike, who killed Professor Rifat Al-Arir. So CNN and BBC excluded Israel from the responsibility of killing Professor Rifat Al-Arir. Please, next slide. Now, with the textual analysis, we did see that all the sources did include quotes from Professor Al-Arir's friends and family, BBC less so than CNN and Al Jazeera, but still all the sources, including Al Jazeera, did include a part about why Professor Al-Arir is considered controversial and why is his writings controversial. At the same time, none of the article included a historical context of the colonization of Palestine. And if they included this context, it would have been clear why Professor Al-Arir is writing that or this, and the writing would not be controversial anymore. Please, next slide. And then we look at the visual analysis. For CNN, they did include a video of Professor Al-Arir with his recording. Apparently in an interview with CNN, he asked for this recording to be shared in case he was killed. So the video basically contains various pictures of Professor Al-Arir with his family or doing, daily tasks. Al Jazeera also included a picture of Professor Rifat Al-Arir, but if we look closely to the headline, we can see Rifat Al-Arir sought to tell Western audience of the horrors in Gaza, but could also be controversial. So even at the picture that is at the start of the article, we can see the word controversial, which kind of justifies the killing of Professor Rifat Al-Arir. So this person was killed because he was mainly controversial. Please, next slide. And then we have BBC. BBC only included this picture. CNN, on the other side, other than the first picture, they did include pictures of Professor Rifat Al-Arir with his friends, Professor Rifat Al-Arir picking strawberries, and so on. Even Al Jazeera included these, but BBC chose to include only this picture, which is dark. It's blurry. We can't really see we can't really discern the facial expression of Professor Rifat Al-Arir, and they did not include any caption with the pictures. Please, next slide. So the second news event that we will reflect on is the release of the elderly Israeli hostage during the Hamas hostage prisoners exchange deal. So first thing, we have to compare the headlines. The headline of CNN reads, "I went through hell, released Hamas hostage describes being kidnapped and taken into tunnel system." And then BBC, "I went through hell, says elderly hostage released by Hamas." Al Jazeera, Israeli captive endured hell in attack but treated well in Gaza. So just to point something out, in the text of both CNN and BBC, they do mention that the hostage was being treated well in Gaza, but they chose to exclude that from their headline and just include that the hostage went through hell, in which that only happened during the attack. But it makes it seem like she even went through hell when she was held hostage, which contradicts the text of the two articles. Al Jazeera was more fair that it did include that in its headline. Please, next slide. Also, BBC and CNN did describe Palestinian men as barbaric and fanatic killers throughout their text. So here I just want to read a part of the CNN article. They want to project the information that they are treating the hostages very well, using this as a method for being able to show themselves of being humane. So even when Palestinian men are genuinely humane and they're doing humane tasks, humane things, this humanity is always questioned, and they are always being viewed as barbaric or fanatic killers, or as just doing that to have some image or to display some image for the rest of the world. Also, another thing that was noticeable across the three articles, which is the limited historical context of colonization. So they made it seem that everything started on October 7th. They did not mention anything about the colonization of Palestine or anything about the Nakba. Please, next slide. Also, all the articles about this hostage did not include any Palestinian point of view. So no Palestinians were really interviewed to include anything they says or any talking point they had to say in the articles. And also, we can see that comparing this to the article about Professor Al-Arir, we can see that the lived experience and the identity of the hostage are really emphasized. So we know where she was from, we know what she used to work, we know what she loves doing, what hobbies she has, we know a bit about her kids. We know all of that from the text of the article. But in the case of Professor Al-Arir, they included some quotes from his friends and stuff like that, but they did not include what he liked to do in his life, for example, who he really was in his daily life. And what is different for Al Jazeera coverage is that they do hold the Israeli government as responsible for the hostages' suffering. So they do say that And the hostages also are suffering because the government was refusing to make a deal to free them, and the government wanted this war to continue, and so on. Please, next slide. And when it comes to the visual analysis, Al Jazeera did include a picture of the hostage, as we see here, but at the same time, they did include a video of the aftermath of Israeli bombings in the Gaza Strip. On the other hand, please, next slide. On the other hand, we see that CNN, which is the first row here, did include a picture of the hostage, but it also included a video. And the caption of the video says, "Video shows harrowing images from Nir Oz kibbutz after Hamas attack." And in the video, we can see some shots where there's blood, and we can see some fire going on, and all of that. But we don't know the source of this stuff. We don't know whose blood is that. We don't know anything about that. So it makes it seem like Hamas did all that, or Hamas caused all that, even though articles that were later on published did say that Israelis were killing their own using the Apache helicopters, or to not let Hamas take hostages inside of the Gaza Strip, and so on. But the video gives us another perspective where Hamas is really responsible for all this violence. And then we look at the BBC. We also have a picture of the hostage, and we have that person with her is her husband, and he is still being held as a hostage in Gaza. We have that here in the caption of the photo. And then the BBC included all the video of the hostage being interviewed. And in this video, the hostage says that she was being treated well in Gaza, but they refused to include that in their headlines. Please, next slide. So when we look at these two events and we analyze them, we can see that all three outlets across their coverage, we can see that Palestinian men's experiences really depend on their status in society. So, for example, Professor Rifat Al-Arir was covered because he was a professor, and even he was a professor and was covered, but the word controversial was also present throughout the text. It's like to say that he is controversial. And maybe for me, I think it also says that it justifies his killing by the Israeli airstrike. And also across the three outlets, there exists an adherence to framing Palestinian men as inherently violent, irrational, while also neglecting their suffering. And that is very clear in the second article about the hostage being freed. They don't really want to mention that the hostage was treated well inside of Gaza, because that will make Palestinian men look good. And even though the hostage did say so, inside the text of the article, they also, especially BBC and CNN, not Al Jazeera, they do allude that Palestinian men, even if they're treating her well, they're still violent and hypersexual and so on. We can also see a selective empathy where the Israeli side is in need of more empathy than the Palestinian side, and we see that because when we look at how the hostage was covered, we see that we really know everything about her. We know about her life, what she used to do, what she loves to do, her hobbies, her children, and a lot of stuff. So this is used to evoke empathy for the hostage. But when we look at the coverage of Professor Al-Arir, we don't see this. It's like, okay, this person died. We have this information about them, and some of the information is undisclosed. But so we cannot really build empathy towards Professor Al-Arir. Well, we can do that for the Israeli hostage. So we can conclude that while the level of dehumanization differs between the three outlets, Al Jazeera's coverage is a bit more balanced, but still when it comes to Palestinian men, it still depends on their status in society, and sometimes they have to prove like they are good. But still, all the articles do reproduce Orientalist and Islamophobic discourse. Please, next slide. Okay, thank you. So this was the presentation about the two papers, but we do have an exercise at the end.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do now is just first discuss the research that you've done with students, and then we can move to the exercise for the time that we have remaining. So we have approximately 30 minutes left in the class. So just to move towards the student questions, one thing I want to remind students of is you're asking a question, number one, based on the quantitative research that she presented at the start, but also the qualitative research that she showed you. So you can ask your question, but you can also add to it based on what you learned from what she showed you with the qualitative. Remember, the qualitative is comparative research. So this is research that takes you to 3 different news outlets that are preparing content for Western audiences. That content as well is coming not just from Western-based media organizations, but also Al Jazeera, which is based in the region. It's from Qatar, and it's broadcasting to Western audiences in English. And so what she's suggesting in the findings is that even an Arabic-owned media outlet reproduces Orientalist discourses when it comes to representing Palestinian men, reproduces Islamophobic discourses even when representing Palestinian men. So there are some commonalities, there are some problems, but there are also some differences when you go qualitatively into the articles and you look beyond the text to also look at the visuals. So keep that in mind. The other thing that I want to acknowledge too, that's a bit different between the two research methods that were presented. One was just the first 3 months of the genocide. So from October 7th to the end of December. Does anybody remember what happened at the end of December? This is when South Africa submitted the dossier at the criminal court to say, hey, there's a genocide going on here. And so it's interesting, if you remember those figures, they all took a nosedive in December, right around New Year's, right when that brief was submitted. None of the media wanted to talk about Palestine when the news was genocide in Palestine. So just keep that in mind, how things can be omitted with this manufacturing consent objective so blatantly clear that they didn't want to report about genocide, so they just ignored it, and so the news coverage took a nosedive. The other thing is that she said for the qualitative, she sampled specific stories that had certain criteria. So the web scraping, the quantitative method was much larger. It took every story and then filtered out things that that fit according to this kind of broader standard. The qualitative was much more selective. And I think, Noura, you said it was 17 articles?
It's actually around 16 news events. Yeah, but
Yeah,
each news event has 3 articles. So
yeah, so 16
48.
times 3. Yeah, I think we're good there, 48. So 16 news events were selected. According to those news events, each news outlet had to cover it. So that was the selection criteria for the qualitative. So just to give you a sense of how the methods very much differed, but also can give you a different sense of things. I also want to remind you, as Maysalun's going to come up and prepare to answer her question, students in the in-person class, you will be asked to do a reflection based on this next Wednesday, because Monday is our booths on campus. We're doing communication for Palestine, booths for Palestine on campus. People will be installing booths and communicating with students about Palestine based on content that they've prepared that builds on course learning. So next Wednesday, we'll come together, we'll do a reflection based on this open classroom. But Maysalun, you have to move faster up to the table so you can answer your question. And we'll go from Maysalun to hear your answer, Noura, to Maysalun's question. And I will ask each student to introduce themselves before they ask their question. So your name and your major.
Yeah.
Oops.
Hello.
Hello.
Go ahead.
I'm Maysalun Tfaile, senior multimedia journalism major. Okay. On the reading, you said between October 7 and December 31, Western media's cover on the war on Gaza barely mentioned Palestinian men and their experience. First of all, why do you think Western media barely mentioned Palestinian men and their experience during this period? In my opinion, okay, women and children are the weakest on the genocide. يعني they do not participate on combat or defense, or in rare case. So if we portray these these weaker cases, Israel will appear in the worst human image. What do you think?
Okay, so let's start with why I used Burley. Um, because we had the data showed a rare mention of men and boys, or even the variation of boys and men. So both the variations. But maybe if we dived in a qualitative analysis, we will check that there is a mention somewhere, but we're not sure that this mention is about Palestinian men and boys. Maybe it's about Israeli men and boys too. So that's why I said barely. So there could be a mention, but we're not sure about it because the quantitative data did not allow us to look beyond it. And what you said is the problem for me about women and children. Of course, women and children are really weak and in need of protection and everything. But when we focus on just this part of the population, we're kind of delegitimizing the right to live for the other part of the population. Because then when they kill men and boys, or when they go into hospitals and take out men and boys and threaten these men and boys, they would say like, yes, these can be terrorists. These have the ability to be terrorists, and that can be rooted also in this understanding that only women and children are in need of protection. Even though there was a reading when I was writing the paper about genocides in general, and in cases of genocide in general, men and boys are really the most targeted population because they're not protected most of the time. It's always the women and children. We have to get women and children to safety. So the genocide was mostly to men and boys. They were killed, they were buried, they were discovered in mass graves, and so on. So yes, they can. The use of men and boys can really, push people to act more. Can really push people to act more. But we also have to think about its second fold, which is, the legitimization of the killing of another population.
Yes, but I mean, on the point of view of Western and the Israelis' image in the world, when we talk a lot about women and the children, they will be on image about target humanity. But when we focus on man, on Israelis' image, they target the terrorist. I mean, it's a good idea for the Israeli to focus not on women and the children, to focus on man.
So, are you saying for
I agree.
Israeli media or for Western media in general?
On the Western media, about the Israeli image.
Okay, yeah. So the thing is, they don't even mention men and boys. They are lumped together under the banner of terrorists, like you said. So for them, these people are targeting terrorists. But we have to look beyond that. Are all men and boys terrorists? And what is terrorist? Is resistance terrorist? Because they're exercising their right to resist. So who consider these people terrorists? So here is my point, that we have to look beyond this mention that Israeli is targeting terrorists. Which can be related to the qualitative study, because there's some events in the qualitative study that I saw where mainstream Western media went back to the image of, for example, this humanitarian school was bombed because there were terrorists inside, and it's in the headline. And then we see many killed, whether women, whether children, whether others. So we really need to question that trope of terrorists. Okay, it will help Israel look that is targeting terrorists, but we need to question this because it's also helping to legitimize the killing of Palestinian men and boys, of even Arab men and boys before. It is a real problem not to recognize that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think just to build on, you don't have to go yet, just to build on Maysalun's question and comment, I think what your quantitative research showed is, like you said, hardly ever do the media actually mention men and boys? And what they mention more is terrorists.
Yeah.
So in that sense, they are painting Palestinian population in general, and as Noura just said, even when they're bombing a school or a hospital, they're claiming there's terrorists under it, right?
Exactly.
So they are, as you said, Israel is using this trope of terrorism, and it is a trope, right? Remember tropes from media and society, outdated stereotype, like these ideas that are rooted in Orientalism and racism and so on. So yes, they are indeed using this to bring the world into complicity with their genocide by painting everything that's Palestinian, everything that's been bombed, as some sort of terrorist-related activity or terrorist. So thank you for that, my Saloon. We're going to invite Lynn to come up now and ask her question and introduce herself. I'll stay with you in the box until Lynn moves up here. Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Hi,
Hello.
Lynn Qais, multimedia journalism student. So my question is, why do mainstream media frame women and children as the only victim in the war, while ignoring the suffering of men who may be a father, a brother, a student, or simply a worker? Why are men only portrayed as terrorists, not as who are resisting?
Now, I will start with why do mainstream media frame only women and children as victims, and I do think it's rooted in part of it international law, but also international treaties that were signed to protect people in times of war. And even in these treaties, if we read them, there is always women and children are at the start to get to safety and so on. So that's a part of it. And why do mainstream Western media do not recognize the rest of men and boys as just men and boys? Because I think that would contradict the whole Israeli genocide. Because recognizing that these are just men and boys would contradict the topic point that mainstream Western media is just being terrorists and it's killing terrorists. So that is also part of it.
Just say thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Noura. Yeah, here's your paper. So we're going to turn to Carol, who's going to come and ask you more about the article. So the students were invited to quotes from the article as they prepared their question. I'm going to leave it open for you, okay?
Hi.
Hello.
I can't hear.
You don't need to hear. You just ask your question.
Hi, it's Carol, a communication student last year. So in the literature review part, there was a quote about the dehumanization that can further take the form of derealization. And my question, builds on that if the media makes Palestinian men's death seem very unworthy of grief and doesn't acknowledge even their death, doesn't this show that grief itself, like other emotions, are being used as a political weapon and tool in deciding whose lives matters and whose doesn't? And don't we in that discourse risk to become numb altogether to the death of mass people, especially Palestinians, and consider it as background noise and ignore news altogether?
Yes, I think I do agree with you on what is allowed to surface in mainstream Western media, especially when it comes to grief. Also, when writing the article, I came across a piece written by Maya Mirtashi, which is also a gender scholar, and she wrote about something similar that happened during the coverage of the 2014 Israeli war on Gaza too. And it was the same thing, where men and boys did not figure, not in the death count, and not in the suffering, not anywhere. So she wrote something, it's like, she wrote that we are not allowed to publicly mourn Palestinian men and boys because there is this image that these men and boys kind of deserve to die in in media, in mainstream Western media, because these men and boys are terrorists. And of course, when we have this image at some point, we will get to a point where genocide is being broadcasted live in front of us, and we wouldn't really care a lot, or we wouldn't really have a bit of critical thinking to go beyond this. But I also think that at the same time, while the genocide is being like broadcasted, it did drive a bit of change in critical thinking, especially in the West, more so than here in the Arab world. And we're seeing that in the actions that are being taken that I think they were never taken before. But still, I think there is a fear to publicly mourn Palestinian men and boys, and even Palestinian men that are part of like the resistance and everything. And this is their right; it's their right to resist. You see a fear to publicly mourn them in media, unless really the media outlet had a very radical way of writing or the articles and so on. So yes, I do think there is a like public condemnation when it comes to the use of grief or mourning when it comes to Palestinian men.
Yes, I do agree, but I wanted to ask, do you think if men were mourned on the media in the West and here in our Arab countries, do you think this will help us give them more, if we can say, importance or visuality, or does this just makes us add to the compilation, not us as personally, but the public, to add to a compilation of more death and more genocide, and that will drift us away? What's
I do think I do think if they were warned from the start of the genocide, Israel would not have been able to just pass on the image that it's targeting terrorists, and justify everything with I'm targeting terrorists, because no, these are like literally just men and boys going on with their lives. So yes, I do think it would have changed something, but I'm not sure to what extent it would have changed something when all the world now is saying no, and it's ongoing, and Netanyahu being giving a space to go into the UN and talk. So I'm not sure to what extent it will change, but at some point it would have given Palestinian men and boys a bit of place in society, other than considering them terrorists.
Yeah, I would add to Carol's question with the observation that look at how much attention Israeli death has in Western media. Look at the names of people, their occupations, their personal stories, their life histories, as you said, their lived experiences. We don't see this for Palestinian men, and we do see it somewhat at times, sometimes for Palestinian women or children, but rarely. But when there is a mass compilation of names and faces, as there was just before the May 2021 ceasefire, if you remember, a lot of Western newspapers all of a sudden put up the image of babies killed by Israel on the front page after Israeli newspapers had done it. And that did ultimately, afterwards, a ceasefire was brokered. So I do think that kind of attention, drawing on the lived experience of all victims of war, does help turn public opinion against war again and again. And I think there's no difference when it comes to the war in Palestine. So thank you for your question, Carol. And I want to bring Giorgio to the hot seat for an analysis for us. Okay, so we go to the next slide. Giorgio,
yes.
Come.
There's two examples of headlines.
Okay, we'll let Giorgio do one, and we'll let Lynn do another, because I was going to call her up to ask a question, but I'm going to skip your question and just let you do analysis, okay? So Giorgio, we're not picking on you and Lynn. We just think that, everybody should have a chance in front of the camera to do some live learning. That's what we're doing, live learning in this classroom. So I go to the next one, or do you? Yeah, you're going to do it yourself. If you
No, do I introduce myself?
Yes, of course you do. You must.
Hi, my name is Jojo Haddad. I'm a communication student last year.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Okay, so any instructions for Giorgio, or do I just go to the slide? What do you want me to do?
Okay, we just go to the slide first. Okay, so here I included an example. First, you have a headline from CNN, then a headline from BBC, and then a headline from Al Jazeera. And reading these headlines, you can see if there's any language that is being used that shouldn't be used, or if there's any omissions in the headlines, and so on.
Okay. Do I read them?
Sure.
Out loud? Okay.
Yeah.
So CNN, at least 19 killed and more feared buried in Israeli airstrike on Gaza humanitarian zone targeting Hamas militants. BBC, Israeli strike in Gaza humanitarian zone kills 19. Hamas run healthy ministry says. And finally, Al Jazeera, Israeli strike on Gaza's Al Mawasi safe zone kills at least 19. Now in the CNN, I think they kind of like didn't. They called them first of all militants. They didn't like say that they are attacking like peoples, innocent people, civilians, and like those Hamas militias aren't all like aggressors. Some of them can be women and children and like men who are workers. So they kind of use the wrong terms to describe them. Same goes for BBC. I mean, they didn't really mention the name of the ministry. They just said that the health ministry says.
And the Hamas run part. Remember, we
And the
talked
Hamas
about that
run,
with the
they
Shahad.
are always claiming that Hamas are like the ones attacking. Like if Israel kills people, they bomb schools and hospitals, it's Hamas's fault. They try to claim that Hamas attacked first. That's why we decided to kill people. Al Jazeera, they did like name Al Mawasi safe zone, and they mentioned the Israeli strike. I don't know what else
So
to say.
kills at least 19
They
what?
didn't mention the number. Like they said at least 19. It could have
19
been more.
what? Cats? Dogs?
Yeah, they didn't mention who they killed.
Kills what?
So all of them are kind of biased. There is kind of a bit of propaganda in the headlines. That's
Okay,
what I analyzed.
so if we reflect back to the CNN headline, first of all, yes, they did mention Hamas militants, but then we see that they brought in Hamas militants to kind of justify why Israel is bombing a safe zone or a supposedly safe zone in Gaza. So it justifies like, yeah, it's targeting Hamas. And all the rest are mainly that because Hamas was taking them as human shields or so on. And then when we go to the BBC headline, it does not mention that, but when it says Hamas run health ministry, and it's something used by mainstream Western media where they refer to the health ministry in Gaza as Hamas run, just because they know that in the West, people will question the numbers or what is being said because it's related to Hamas, which is a Hamas run health ministry in Gaza controlled by Hamas. And yes, for Al Jazeera, they just didn't mention who was killed. So like we don't know, like at least 19 Palestinians were killed, or Palestinian civilians were killed. So that was the problem.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I would mention, and
humanitarian zone. They humanitarian means like it's probably innocent humans that they are killing and slaughtering.
Sure, but also more specifically, probably also refugees with rights. So usually humanitarian zones are set up for refugees. Every refugee has rights to food, rights to shelter, rights to return. And more than 80% of the population in Gaza were refugees before the current genocide. And now there's even more refugees who have been internally displaced in Gaza multiple times. And for a refugee not to be mentioned once, in association with humanitarian zone as the preferred term, disappears the rights of refugees, right? Like humanitarian zone, there's no rights associated with that. Using the word refugee asserts international humanitarian law. And so we erased the rights of refugees with all three of these headlines by not mentioning or acknowledging that these are internally displaced refugees who are being targeted. And the last thing I would add, Giorgio, is when we say Hamas-run health ministry says, we talked about this last week with Shahad when she said this is supposed to leave the reader questioning, is this accurate? Or is it terrorist information? Because there's an equation in the West between Hamas equals terrorist. And even though BBC says we don't use the word terrorist, they clearly have created that association, as she found out in her quantitative research. And we see it being reproduced here, implying that a terrorist-run health ministry made this allegation. And we don't even know if the Israeli strike is really an Israeli strike, because it's Hamas that told us. Do you see how it leads doubt to the whole headline? Who's behind the strike and what the strike targeted and why is all in doubt because a terrorist told you in this headline. So thank you very much for that, Giorgio. We're going to bring Lynn to the hot seat. I invite everyone who's tuning in now to watch Noura's presentation to check out the first open classroom we did with Shahid last week, which analyzed the British Pathé films from the 1940s and 50s to understand how this bias that we're analyzing in contemporary headlines today is actually rooted in over nearly 100 years of journalism practice. So Lynn, we're going to put you in the hot seat so you can take on analyzing the next headlines.
Okay, hi, I'm Lynn Khatib. I'm a third year communications major, minoring in PR and advertising. CNN, sexual assaults carried out systematically during Hamas attack, Israeli report says. So my issue with this statement is the way they use systematically, and they put it between quotation marks. Like, it leaves the reader guessing and they say during Hamas attack. They don't give you any info on that kind of attack, and they say Israeli report says. It kind of leaves the reader guessing what is true and what's not true. This is very biased language, actually. So it's really bad for a reader. BBC Israeli report says Hamas sexual violence, systematic and intentional. This is even worse because they're taking info from an Israeli report and they say Hamas sexual violence, quote, systematic and intentional. They're framing Hamas as a really sexual terrorist, which is terrible, and they just are picking out words without giving any sort of context or any sort of more info for the reader. This is very biased for the reader because they will automatically think that Hamas is just raping people on purpose. And then the last one, Al Jazeera, October 7, forensic analysis shows Hamas abuses many false Israeli claims. This is not bad because they're countering Israeli claims, but they could add more information about Hamas abuses. Like, they could say forensic analysis shows claims by Israelis of Hamas abuses and then found out to be untrue.
Okay.
So Noura, you cut out for the analysis of the first one, but she basically called out the use of the quote systematically. So that quote is there, I guess, from the Israeli report. And then putting Hamas in front of attack makes it seem like it started with the Hamas attack. So there's a lot of loaded language in this first headline from CNN too. Just to summarize what she said for you.
Okay. So yes, you're right. First of all, they use systematically. It's like Hamas did on October 7th, performed October 7th in order to rape or sexually assault women in Israeli territory, let's say, occupied territory. And the thing is it's repeated in the BBC headline. That says Hamas sexual violence systematic and intentional in the BBC headline. And the thing is, in both headlines, they did not add the information that emerged after this report was published, which is the information that many claims in this report were false claims. And that's why Al Jazeera added many false Israeli claims. But you're right, in Al Jazeera, they could have said October 7 forensic analysis claims Hamas abuses, because many of the information has already been proven to be wrong. Like, they still kept shows Hamas abuses. But yes, the first two really wanted it to be systematic. They really wanted to emphasize that. I guess, yes.
I think the other thing I would point out for Lynn is rarely do we see Palestinians quoted in headlines like this. So this is an Israeli report. That's where those quotes come from. Rarely do we see any report by the Gaza Health Ministry, for example, quoted in these headlines. Instead, like the headline that Giorgio read, we see Hamas-run health ministry says. So it's not a direct quote even. You see there's no quotes here. So they're not directly quoting. They're still making it seem like it's an allegation by the health ministry in Gaza. And by referring it to as Hamas-run, further delegitimizes that information. But here, it says Israeli report. We don't know if it's the Israeli government. We don't know if it's the IDF. We don't know if it's a settler organization. We don't know who made this report. And there were many people making reports around the events of October 7th who were creating fake news. And they were propagandists. So we don't know who's behind this report by these headlines. One of the things I wanted to mention too, just to reinforce learning from the analysis that you presented us, the qualitative analysis, it's important to know the source, who's quoted. Like Noura said, the qualitative analysis is going to afford her an opportunity to go in depth and see who are the characters and what are their affiliations. Just like these headlines don't tell us who the character is that issued this report or what their affiliation is. Again, what if it is an IDF report? We have no idea if this was made by the occupation forces. But if you remember from the qualitative data she showed us, one of the quotes was from a character that was American, and it said former US professor and FBI agent. So he is an FBI agent, and he was a former US professor. So, but why did they put professor first if it's in the past? Because they want to de-emphasize that they're actually quoting the FBI on Palestine. How does that make that a legitimate source, except that it's US government propaganda? So it's very important to look at the sources and what are their affiliations when you read the news and when you do your news analysis. Noura, we have only 2 minutes to say goodbye. I want to thank you for preparing this research, for sharing with us the research methodology and the outcomes of the article that you published. Congratulations on getting that published. It is open access, so it's a gift for all of you. It was emailed to all students at LAU. Everyone in the open classroom has it as well. So I hope many people read it and learn from it. And then we look forward to seeing your qualitative research in print. So we wish you the best of luck preparing that. And we want to thank you again for joining us in this open classroom today.
Yes, thank you for having me also.
Yeah, I'm going to show you the students in the classroom, okay? These are all the students. Yay. You guys want to say goodbye? Say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, Noura. Have a nice day, okay?
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.